Hello learners, welcome again to our session. Today is a continuation of what we were doing earlier on. Recall in our last class we had talked about assurance engagement, right? And in that case we had defined what assurance engagement is. And before we look at non-assurance, or rather at the elements, probably you can be asked to define what non-assurance engagement is. In the event that you're asked to define what non-assurance engagement is, what will you say? Will you say that Mwalimu was never taught us this one? Or will you say that this one I can work it out very well? So to do this, I want us to go to this past paper question of ours for us to look at this concept that I want us to study today. I want us to go to May 2018, question number 4C. I believe that we do have our past papers. So I want us to go to this question. Of May 2018, question number 4C. May 2018, question number 4C. Kindly, I want us to go to that question and see what you are asked. May 2018, question number 4C. Kindly, let us go to that question. May 2018, question number 4C. And this is what you are asked, my good students. This is what you are asked. We were asked to distinguish between assurance engagements and non-assurance engagements. We were asked to distinguish between assurance engagement and non-assurance engagement. And recall, for assurance engagement, we've already looked at it, whereby we mentioned that at this point, you'll find that the auditor, or rather the practitioner, will express his opinion, or he'll give his conclusion to increase the degree of the intended users other than the responsible party regarding the subject matter, of course, at this point, against certain criteria that we've used. So this is what we mentioned in relation to what? In relation to audit, or rather in relation to assurance engagement. Now, when you are asked to distinguish between, here, if you're asked to distinguish between assurance engagement, assurance and non-assurance engagement, what are we supposed to say? Distinguish between assurance and non-assurance engagement. So looking at this case, looking at this difference, we normally tend to say that assurance and engagement, an assignment in which an assurance or practitioner expresses a conclusion designed to enhance the degree of confidence of the intended users of the report. Whereas for non-assurance engagement, my good student, because that is what we hadn't looked at last time, talk about non-assurance engagement. For non-assurance engagement, this is what we normally tend to say. Non-assurance engagement, we are going to say that these are those that do not result in the degree of auditor's expression, a conclusion aimed at boosting confidence in the report by the users. So you'll find that this, yes, is an engagement that we've been involved in. But ideally, the conclusion of such report is not to increase the degree of confidence of the intended users. Probably I could be doing this just as a matter of advice to the company. I could be doing this just as a matter of assisting the company in relation to compliance, but it's not ideally relating to increasing the degree of confidence of the intended users. That is what you should always understand, that whenever we are looking at it in this case for assurance, the conclusion is aimed at increasing the degree of confidence of the intended users. Whereas for non-assurance is not to increase the degree of confidence of the intended users. That's the main element and difference that you must always grasp at the back of your mind anytime we are looking at, anytime you are talking about non-assurance engagement. Now, in this session of ours today, remember in our last class we had mentioned about assurance engagement. In our session today, I'll also talk about elements of assurance engagement. Elements of assurance engagement. Elements of assurance engagements. Elements of assurance engagement. Elements of assurance engagement. Elements of assurance engagement. And to do this case, my good students, and to do this case, while we are talking about elements of assurance engagement, I want us to dive into this question of ours, which was tested in this question of ours, my good student. Let us check it out. It was tested in May 2019, question number 2B. Let us dive into this question, which was tested in May 2019, question number 2B. Question number 2B. May 2019, question number 2B. Let us jump into that question. Let us jump into that question. This question was tested in May 2019, question number 2B. That will give us a brief in understanding the elements of assurance engagement. So, believing that you are there, believing that you are in this question, May 2019, question number 2B, and I believe you have your past papers. And if you don't have your past papers, kindly, you can get them still on the app, just under past papers, free past papers. You can get them there and download the same. So, looking at this case, this is what you asked in May 2019, question number 2B. This is what you asked. You are told that the finance director of Kijani Industries has requested your firm to undertake a non-audit assurance engagement, later in the year. This is what you asked. Part of your team includes an audit assistant who has not been involved in such an assignment before and has asked you to explain what an assurance engagement involves. And remember, we have talked about that, right? Required, explain 3 key elements of an assurance engagement. Explain 3 key areas of an assurance engagement, So looking at this case, elements of assurance engagement, my good student, because that is what you are required to look at. If you can recall, where we were mentioning that it should kind of engaging a practitioner who is going to give his opinion or conclusion to increase the level of degree of confidence of the intended users, right? Other than responsible party on the subject matter, against certain criteria. Just from that definition, you can clearly see that I'm having 3-party relationship. Just from that definition, you can clearly see that we do have 3-party relationship. And these 3-party relationships we are talking about will include, we are talking about one element of assurance engagement. You are saying we should be having 3-party relationship. Talk about 3-party relationships. 3-party relationship. And at this point, you are talking about 3-party relationship. You are looking at who? We are looking at the practitioner, right? I have engaged a practitioner. Who is, in this case, probably could be an auditor. So this is a person who performs the engagement. Then at this point, you're talking about there should be intended users, right? We're talking about intended users. For the intended users, my good students, you're looking at, these are the people for whom the assurance report is prepared. These are the people for whom the assurance report has been prepared. Ideally, we want to increase the level of confidence of these people. And these are the guys that we are terming them as who? These are the guys that we are terming them as the intended users. So the people whom assurance and report is prepared to. Then we are looking at what? Responsible party. And who are these responsible party? The responsible party in this context, you are looking at the management, because it is the management who have prepared the aspect of the subject matter, which is also another element of assurance engagement. So you're looking at the management. And it is management who have prepared this subject matter. It is the management who have prepared this financial statement. So for us to term assurance engagement as complete, we must have these three-party relationship. That is number one. Number two element under this case, we are talking about, number two, we are talking about the aspect of subject matter. We must be having a subject matter. Talk about our subject matter. In this context, when you're talking about subject matter, ideally, my good students, what should come at the back of our mind anytime we are looking at our subject matter? So in this case, anytime you're talking about the subject matter, my good student, you're looking at it as a form of the financial statements that we are kind of examining. We want to give our conclusion on what has been prepared. And what has been prepared in this case, we are looking at what? We are looking at the financial statements, because that is where our opinion is going to be based on, to make sure that whatever that you are communicating to the intended users is actually what is in the financial statements, so that we can increase that level of confidence. And this is what you're terming it as what? As the subject matter, as a subject, as a subject matter, as a subject, as a subject matter. Then the other element that you can talk about is should be a suitable criteria. We are talking about a suitable criteria. Suitable criteria. So we are talking about suitable criteria. Number three, we are talking about suitable criteria. 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 On the same case, my good students are talking about suitable criteria. So, under suitable criteria, ideally, what you are looking at is the aspect of the relevance. If these items are very relevant, we are looking at it on aspect of the, if it has followed, say, like the set rules, and in this case, we are talking about standards that have been set in place. So, have they followed all these elements? Have they followed all these regulations? Have they followed all these standards while we are preparing our financial statements? So this is what we're talking about, the aspect of what? There should be a suitable criteria, a suitable criteria, a suitable criteria. Then, at the same case, we are talking about, we've talked about the subject matter. So, we are talking about three-party, talk about subject matter, talk about suitable criteria, talk about suitable criteria, talk about suitable criteria. So these are the main three elements of assurance engagement that you must always focus our mind in, that you must always focus our mind in. So three-party relationship, we're having a subject matter, and we do have what? A suitable criteria, a suitable criteria. So after we've looked at that, my good students, the next concept that we will be looking at, which will be more of the same as what we've done here, that should be types of assurance engagements. The types of assurance engagement is more the same as what? Is more the same as the talk of levels of assurance engagement. These are just one and the same thing, types and levels of assurance engagement reports. So to this juncture, thank you so much, and let us meet in the next session. Thank you.